I make my living as a freelance filmmaker and work on commercials, documentaries, and sometimes on small independent movies. It's a fun life most days, but sometimes I end up in challenging and even disturbing situations. One time, I was working on a low-budget movie that was set in a prison. We actually used a prison that was closed down. In some ways, that might sound glamorous, but the hours were long and the place was dark, cold, and spooky as hell. We worked all over the prison, from the offices to the cafeteria to the chapel, but by far the spookiest place we shot was in the cell blocks. All the time we were there, it was as if all the memories and all the suffering of the inmates permeated the place. It seeped through the hard metal bars and down through the cell blocks like a driving rain of a midnight storm. One late night, the smell of sulfur filled the air. What was strange was that I was the only one on the crew to smell it, but it filled my nostrils, causing me to go into a coughing fit so severe I had to leave the cell block. But things got worse after that. We had to spend a couple more very long days in the cell blocks, and I hated every minute of it. My skin crawled with goosebumps in the entire time I was in there. On one long shot, the cameraman cut the shot off early because he thought he saw someone in the back of the shot, down in the cell blocks, moving around. He was sure it was a crew member ruining the perfect shot, but when I was sent down to run the person off, there was no one there. All the while, I searched for this shadow person. I felt a chill across my entire body, as if I'd been dipped in ice water. I nearly left the project then, but I really liked the director, and I needed the money. But the next day was my final day on the shoot. We were deep in the cell blocks for the final time. I was in a cell running light cables from cell to cell to get another long shot. I was stringing the final few feet of cable when I felt the force of something slam into my back. It felt like a fist hitting me just below the rib cage, and the blow knocked the air out of my lungs and drove me to my knees. It took me almost a minute to recover, but I did have the strength to look around and I saw nothing, but I felt something, like a malevolent force filling the cell. The only thing I can say is it felt evil. After I recovered, I left the cell, the set, and the prison. I hated leaving the project, but enough was enough. I never wanted to be in that prison ever again. I was between jobs when a friend said where she worked needed a fill-in for about a month. It seemed like a good fit, so I went for it. She didn't tell me exactly what the job was right away, but I quickly found out. It was a tour guide in an historic maximum security prison. Okay, not the most ideal place, but it would only be for a month. What could go wrong? Famous last words, right? At first, it was sort of fun. The place had a lot of history and the people who came seemed to enjoy the tours, but there was one specific area that sort of creeped me out right from the start. It was up in an area of the prison where people who worked there sometimes spent the night. It seemed strange that anyone other than prisoners would be there every night, but it happened from time to time, or so I was told. One night, after my last tour, I realized that I left my notepad up in that area. I was one of the last people in the entire building, except for the people at the front door, which was very far away from the sleeping area. I had an uneasy feeling as I moved through the building and up to the second floor. There was just this feeling in the air. I couldn't pin it down, but it just seemed ominous. Just as I was about to enter that area, I heard a child's voice echoing in the dark. I absolutely knew that there were no children up there. That's when I decided I could get that notepad the next day. But it wasn't that easy because I had several days to work in the prison, and my normal duties would take me up into that area almost every day. Still, I did my best to avoid that area in the prison, at least after dark for sure. I was able to do that for about 2 weeks, but nearing the end of my time there, I had just finished up a tour in that area when I heard that child's voice again. I'd ushered out the last few people when I turned around and looked at the area we called the stage. It was at the end of the hallway, and it did look like a mini stage. I saw this shadowy form on the stage. It wasn't a full-size human, but it was more like child-sized. I didn't know whether to be afraid or just stand there and wonder. The form never came my way, but moved across the stage and slowly exited into one of the rooms just off the edge of the stage. I wasn't sure what to do, but after a few moments I moved forward and looked into the room where the form had entered, but the room was totally empty. A part of me hoped to see the child form, but a bigger part of me was glad that there was no one there. I ended up quitting a few days earlier than I had planned, but I still remember those days in the prison and the sound of that child. Sometimes I still hear him in my dreams. I'm one of those people that likes just about anything that has to do with ghosts or hauntings. I've explored many haunted places, including graveyards, haunted houses, and even ghostly grounds of haunted mansions. Because I was young and didn't know what true fear was. Whatever it was, I said, bring it on. But I quickly learned there were things out there that you didn't want to hear, see, or experience. But the most scary place I've ever visited was a prison that had a dark, unspoken history. Unfortunately, when we scheduled our tour, it was just after I'd had a slight ankle injury and I was on crutches. I was able to navigate through most of the places in the prison, but towards the end of the tour, my leg became fatigued and there was a set of narrow stairs that, as they say, just became a mountain too hard for me to climb. So I decided to take a rest and let my friends tell me about what they saw in that part of the prison. Because our group was small, I was the only one left behind and decided to take a rest in the chapel. It was a large, cavernous room that showed a lot of wear and tear, and to be honest, there was nothing peaceful about the place. Almost as soon as the rest of the party left me there alone, I got this sense of an eerie creepiness in the place, as if I weren't alone. Of course, I looked around the room, and clearly, there was no one there but me. Still, it felt like there were eyes watching me, and there was some sort of presence inside the room. It was just a feeling, and I couldn't escape it. I could hear the tour going on in the distance, but then I heard something else. It seemed like a lot of low whispering or a voice speaking words I couldn't understand. But clearly underneath those words, I could hear an undercurrent of pain and suffering. It seemed to be an unspeakable amount of pain. Goosebumps broke out all over my body. All I wanted to do was get out of that room, but my bad leg was throbbing in pain. So I decided to wait it out and see if the sound went away on its own. But sadly and terrifyingly, it did not. In fact, it increased in volume and got so loud that I had to cover my ears. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it went away on its own, leaving me alone and covered in my own sweat. I quickly got to my feet and used my crutches to move out of the chapel. Ever since that day, I've always wondered what terrible things happened in that room. Sometimes at night, before I go to sleep, I still hear those tortured whispers.